The morning started like any other on mining station Kepler 7. Commander Zixthala was reviewing the daily mineral reports when the alarms began screaming. Their tentacles turned pale blue with fear as they watched the scanner display. Massive ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, and every colonist knew exactly what those jagged black holes meant. The Void Hunters had found them. Zixtala's hands shook as they reached for the emergency beacon. Their people were miners, not fighters. They grew crystals and sang harmony songs. The closest thing they had to a weapon was a mining laser that took 10 minutes to charge. Against the galaxy's most feared raiders, they might as well throw rocks. All civilians to the shelters, Zixtala announced over the station intercom, trying to keep their voice steady. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Outside the viewports, the Void Hunter ships moved like hungry sharks. These weren't just pirates. They were something much worse. They didn't just steal cargo or demand ransom. They harvested entire species, turning living beings into processed nutrients. Whole planets had gone silent after their visits. The emergency beacon was their only hope. The Galactic Peace Corps had promised to protect peaceful colonies like theirs. Zixthala input the frequency code they'd memorized during safety drills, their tentacles trembling as they worked. They had to get this right. One wrong number and the signal would go nowhere. But panic makes even simple tasks difficult. As the Void Hunter ships drew closer, Zixthala's fingers slipped. Instead of entering frequency 847 Alpha 9, they typed 847 Alpha 8, a single digit. One tiny mistake that would change everything. The distress signal shot across space at faster-than-light speed, carrying images of their peaceful colony and desperate pleas for help. But instead of reaching the diplomatic offices of the Peace Corps, it pierced through the void to a very different destination, halfway across the galaxy. Admiral Minji was finishing her morning coffee when the signal arrived at Terra Defense. Command. The holographic display flickered to life, showing scenes that made her jaw clench. Tentacled beings with soft, glowing skin were being herded by mechanical horrors. Children cried for their parents while processing machines hummed in the background. "What am I looking at?" Minji asked her, Aide Lieutenant Jiho. "Long-range distress call, Admiral. Looks like raiders hit a mining colony. They're requesting immediate assistance from..." Jiho checked his screen. "The Galactic Peace Corps." Minji studied the images. She'd seen plenty of combat footage, but this was different. These weren't soldiers dying in battle. These were civilians, families being torn apart by monsters who treated sentient life like livestock. Admiral called out Sergeant Hannah from the communications station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the attacking vessels. These aren't ordinary pirates. The ship designs match intelligence reports on something called the Void Hunters." Minji had read those reports. The Void Hunters were legendary, even among human military circles, not for their honor, but for their complete lack of it. They'd been terrorizing the galaxy for centuries, and nobody had ever successfully stopped them. "They made one mistake," Minji said quietly, cracking her knuckles with a sound like breaking wood. "They picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize." Turned to the massive AI console that dominated the command center. "Ares, wake up. We've got work to do." The artificial intelligence came online with a soft hum. ARES had been designed as a tactical support system, but over the years it had developed something resembling personality. Some days, Minji wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. "Good morning, Admiral," Ares said in its cheerfully polite voice. "I've been monitoring the distress signal. The attacking force consists of 12 Void Hunter vessels, approximately 10,000 hostile entities total. The defenders appear to have zero military capability. I'm to intercept. If we deploy the full Retribution fleet, we can reach them in 4 hours and 37 minutes. Minji smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Fire up the fleet, Jiho. Every ship we've got. It's time to introduce these Void Hunters to some actual apex predators." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers began preparation sequences. Throughout the Terra Defense orbital stations, massive warships powered up their engines. These weren't exploration vessels or diplomatic cruisers. They were pure instruments of war, built by a species that had clawed its way to the top of its Home planet's food chain. Admiral Arias said thoughtfully, I should mention that the distress call wasn't actually meant for us. The frequency suggests they were trying to reach the Galactic Peace Corps, Minji replied, watching her. Fleet assemble on the tactical display. They're about to learn there's more than one way to keep the peace. Back on the mining station, Zixtella huddled with the other survivors in the emergency shelter. The Void Hunters had begun their harvest, and the screams echoing through the corridors were getting closer. They'd sent their plea for help hours ago, but no response had come. They expected polite negotiation if help arrived at all. The Peace Corps were diplomats, after all. They would try to reason with the attackers, offer trade deals, or territorial concessions. Maybe if they were very lucky, Chorus might evacuate some civilians. They had no idea that their mistyped message had reached something very different. Something that didn't negotiate with monsters. Something that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of violence and had only recently learned to feel guilty about enjoying it. The ethereals were about to witness. Why humans were the only species in the known galaxy that hunted dangerous prey for fun. And why that might just be exactly what the universe needed. Captain Nashkar was having a good day. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he watched his harvest crews work through the mining station's corridors. The ethereals were perfect. Specimens, their bioluminescent tears, made excellent preservatives, and their soft flesh processed beautifully into nutrient paste. This colony would feed his fleet for months. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, Eternal Hunger, admiring the efficiency of his operation. 3,000 years of raiding had taught the Void Hunters how to strip a colony clean in record time. His tactical officer, Vexhai, monitored the collection data with professional pride. Status report, Nashkar growled, his forearms folded behind his back. Harvest proceeding on schedule, Captain. We've processed 60% of the adult population. Younglings are being prepared for long-term storage. No resistance encountered. Of course, there was no resistance. Ethereals were pacifists, who had never developed weapons more dangerous than mining tools. It was almost boring how easy they were to harvest. Sometimes Nashkar missed the old days when prey species would at least try to fight back. That's when the proximity alarms started screaming, Captain. High's voice cracked with shock. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, reading 37 vessels in attack formation. Nashkar's mandibles stopped clicking. 37 ships was more than most species could field. His own fleet consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, enough to terrorize any known military force. But this was unexpected. Identify the vessels, he ordered, moving to the tactical display. Vexai's claws danced over the scanner controls. Unknown configuration, Captain. I'm reading massive energy signatures, but the design doesn't match any known military. They're almost entirely weapons. These ships are 90% armament. Nashkar studied the holographic display. The approaching vessels looked wrong somehow. Most ships in the galaxy were built for multiple purposes: transport, exploration, commerce. These looked like someone had taken the concept of warship and removed everything that wasn't directly related to killing. Weapons platforms, he mused. Some primitive species built flying guns instead of proper starships. How amusing. The communication array crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The voice that came through was calm, professional, and utterly confident. This is Admiral Minji of the Terra Defense Fleet to all Void Hunter vessels. You have 60 seconds to cease hostile operations, release all captured ethereals, and prepare to surrender for processing of war crimes. This is your only warning. The bridge fell silent. Nashkar's crew had been raiding for decades, and nobody had ever given them ultimatums. The galaxy's civilized species sent negotiators or fled in terror. They didn't make demands. Then Nashkar began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and built into the terrifying roar that had been the last sound thousands of victims had heard. His crew joined in, their chittering and clicking filling the bridge with alien mirth. 60 seconds? Nashkar gasped between laughs. To surrender to mammals? Did you hear that, Vexai? These primitives think they can threaten the Void Hunters. He opened all communication channels, broadcasting to both his fleet and the human vessels. I am Captain Nashkar. terror of the void, harvester of worlds. We are the apex of evolution. Perfected killing machines who have harvested 1,000 species across 3 millennia. We feast on the screams of our enemies and decorate our ships with the bones of heroes. His boast echoed across space, carried on subspace frequencies to both fleets. He expected the humans to flee or beg for mercy. Instead, something very strange happened. To every screen on his bridge flickered and displayed the same image. Quote, a simple logo reading a restoration and entertainment system. Then a cheerful voice filled the bridge. Hello there. I'm Aries, and I'll be your entertainment coordinator today. I couldn't help but notice you folks seem a bit confused about who exactly you're dealing with, so I've prepared a small educational presentation. Nashkar's mandibles clicked in confusion. What sorcery is this? How are you broadcasting on our secured channels? Oh, that's simple, Ares replied happily. Your security system is about 300 years behind ours. What? Don't worry about that right now. Let's focus on your education. The screens changed to show footage that made the Void Hunter crew freeze in horror. Humans wrestling massive reptilian beasts with their bare hands. Humans jumping out of perfectly functional aircraft for fun. Humans eating plants that were literally toxic to most known life forms and calling them snacks. This is impossible, Vexi whispered. No species voluntarily exposes itself to such dangers. The footage continued. Humans climbing vertical rock faces without safety equipment. Humans swimming with apex predators. Humans running ultramarathons through deserts that would kill most beings in hours. Now, you might be wondering, Ares continued conversationally, what kind of species would do these things for entertainment? Well, let me share some interesting facts about human evolution. New images appeared. Early humans chasing prey animals across vast distances until the animals literally died from exhaustion. Humans living in environments that ranged from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. Humans developing weapons not out of necessity, but out of creative curiosity. You see, Ares explained, humans are what we call persistence predators. 8. They don't have the biggest claws or the strongest bite. Instead, they just refuse to give up. Ever. They will chase their prey across continents if necessary. And here's the really interesting part. They consider this fun. Nashkar's crew was staring at the screens in growing unease. One video showed a human child, barely past infancy, playing with a creature that could have easily killed it. The creature was wagging its tail happily. That brings us to another fascinating point, Ares continued. Humans are the only known species that domesticated other apex predators just because they thought it would be nice to have them around. Those dogs you're seeing, their ancestors were wolves, pack hunters, and humans turned them into companions through nothing but patience and friendship. The final image was perhaps the most unsettling. Humans at play. Children laughing as they ran through dangerous terrain. Adults competing in contests that seemed designed to cause injury. Families gathering to watch other humans engage in ritualized combat called sports. So to summarize, Ares said cheerfully, you've just threatened a species that considers mortal danger to be recreational activity. Species that domesticated wolves because they were lonely. Species that evolved specifically to never, ever give up. The bridge was dead quiet, except for the sound of nervous mandible clicking. Correction to your earlier statement, Captain Nashkar, Ares added. You were apex predators. Past tense. We're the species that looked at apex predators and thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun to make those into pets? Nashkar stared at the screens, his confidence evaporating like morning mist. In 3,000 years of raiding, he had never encountered anything like this. Species that begged, species that fought, species that fled. But never a species that seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of violence. The 60 seconds were almost up. The 60 seconds expired, and Captain Nashkar made the biggest mistake of his very long life. He decided to fight. All ships, open fire, roared into his communicator. Show these mammals what happens when they threaten the Void Hunters. The response was immediate and absolutely devastating. It's not because the humans destroyed the Void Hunter fleet. That would have been expected. What happened instead was so much worse for Nashkar's reputation. Captain Seok of the Human Marines watched from his transport as the Void Hunter weapons fired harmlessly into space. Every shot missed, not because human ships were faster, but because Ares had quietly taken control of the Void Hunter targeting systems during his educational presentation. "Ares, you magnificent bastard," Seok muttered, checking his equipment one final time. "Ready for boarding action, Admiral?" "Proceed, Captain," came Admiral Minji's voice over the com. "Remember, we're broadcasting this live. Try to look heroic." Seok grinned. His Marines were carrying weapons loaded with depleted uranium rounds. Ammunition so powerful, it could punch through battleship armor. They were boarding ships filled with creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, and they were doing it all on live television. "You're at the Admiral," Seok announced to his team. "Smile for the cameras. We're about to become famous." The boarding pods launched like bullets from the human ships, their armored hulls designed to punch through enemy defenses, but Ares had already disabled the Void Hunter point defense systems. The pods slammed into the enemy hulls with surgical precision, cutting through metal like hot knives through butter. Meanwhile, Ares was having the time of his artificial life. Every communication channel in the galaxy was now carrying his broadcast, and he had a captive audience of billions. "Welcome back to Educational Hour with Ares," the AI announced cheerfully. "Today we're learning about human recreational activities. Did you know that humans evolved to chase prey animals until the animals literally died from exhaustion?" It's true. And here's the fascinating part. Modern humans still do this for fun. They call it marathon running, and they give medals to whoever can do it fastest. Across the galaxy, countless species watched in horrified fascination as footage played of humans running impossible distances while smiling. The commentary continued over live feeds from the boarding action. Now, let's talk about Australian wildlife. Ares continued as human Marines fought their way through Void Hunter corridors. Australia is a continent on Earth where humans decided to live despite the fact that almost everything there is designed to kill them. Poisonous spiders, venomous snakes, crocodiles that can bite through steel, jellyfish that can stop your heart with a touch. And humans? They made it into a tourist destination. Lieutenant Aaron kicked down a bulkhead door and found herself face to face with a room full of captured ethereal children. The younglings were huddled together, their soft skin glowing pale. Blue with fear. Behind them, a massive Void Hunter warrior raised a weapon that looked like it could cut through mountains. Aaron didn't hesitate. Her depleted uranium rounds punched through the warrior's armor like it was made of paper. The creature fell with a crash that shook the deck plates. "Hey there, little ones," she said softly, switching to the universal translator. "I'm Lieutenant Aaron. We're here to take you home." The ethereal children stared at her in wonder. This strange, two-legged creature had just defeated a monster that had haunted their nightmares. She was being gentle with them, speaking in soft tones despite the battle raging around them. "Are you a warrior goddess?" one of the younglings asked in their musical language. Aaron laughed. "Nope, just a human, though I appreciate the compliment," lifted the smallest child, barely knee-high to a human, and carried him toward the evacuation route. The live cameras captured every moment as this alien soldier, armed with weapons that could level buildings, cradled a frightened child like he was made of glass. Admiral Minji watched the feeds from her command center, and she smiled. This was going exactly according to plan. It's not the military plan that had been simple enough. This was the psychological warfare plan that would end the Void Hunter threat forever. "Ares, how's our broadcast doing? Viewership is up 6,000%, Admiral. I'm getting requests for interviews from news networks across 17 star systems." The footage of Lieutenant Aaron rescuing those children has already been shared 50 million times. The strategy was brutally elegant in its simplicity. Instead of simply destroying the Void Hunter ships, the humans were systematically disabling them while broadcasting every moment of the rescue operation. The galaxy was watching as their most feared monsters were being dismantled by creatures who treated impossible odds as mild inconvenience. On the Eternal Hunger, Captain Nashkar watched his warriors flee in terror as human Marines advanced. Through his ship, These humans moved like they were strolling through a park, casually chatting while destroying thousand-year-old killing machines. Captain Vexai reported, his voice shaking. They're not just defeating us. They're humiliating us. The humans are rescuing prisoners, while simultaneously providing educational commentary about their homeworld's dangerous wildlife. ARES's voice filled the bridge again. Fun fact, humans keep some Australian animals as pets. That's right, creatures. That would be classified as bioweapons by most galactic standards, are considered good boys by humans. They even have a saying, dogs are man's best friend. These are the same humans who are currently treating your warriors like a minor training exercise. Through the viewports, Nashkar could see human ships performing rescue operations with clockwork precision. Medical teams were treating injured ethereals while combat engineers repaired damaged station systems. It was like watching a machine designed specifically for saving lives operate at peak efficiency. But what truly broke the Void Hunter captain's spirit was watching the rescued ethereals. Instead of cowering in fear or trauma, they were gathering around their human rescuers like children around storytellers. Their natural curiosity was overcoming their fear as they watched these strange beings who had come from nowhere to save them. One group of ethereal younglings had surrounded Sergeant Hannah, who was explaining how her tactical armor worked. She was being patient and kind, answering their questions, while her squad set up a field hospital. The contrast between her gentle manner with the children and the devastating efficiency with which she'd cleared the corridor of Void Hunters was striking. Ares continued his broadcast. Humans have this interesting psychological trait. They become exponentially more dangerous when protecting those weaker than themselves. Threaten a human, and they'll fight you. Threaten someone a human cares about, and they become something altogether different. The live feed showed human Marines moving through the Void Hunter ships like unstoppable forces of nature. But these weren't mindless killing machines. They were discriminating, precise, and overwhelmingly protective of the victims they'd come to save. Captain Icy Oak reached the bridge of the Eternal Hunger to find Nashkar sitting in his command chair, staring at the displays showing his fleet's systematic dismantlement. Captain Nashkar COX said politely, his weapon trained on the alien commander. By the authority of the Terra Defense Force and about 17 different galactic humanitarian treaties you violated, you're under arrest. Nashkar looked up at this human who had just conquered his flagship with casual efficiency. What are you? Sio considered the question seriously. We're the neighbors you really shouldn't have messed with. And now the whole galaxy knows it. The footage was already spreading across every communication network in known space. The narrative was simple and devastating. The galaxy's most feared predators had been defeated by a species that considered danger to be entertainment, and they'd done it all while being remarkably gentle with the victims they'd rescued. The Void Hunter's reign of terror was over. But more importantly, everyone now knew that there was something in the galaxy that was scarier than monsters. There were the people who showed up to stop the monsters. The War Council of the Void Hunters had met in the same chamber for over 2,000 years. Ancient and terrible beings gathered around a table carved from the bones of extinct civilizations, their scarred faces reflecting centuries of conquest and bloodshed. But today, for the first time in their recorded history, they looked afraid. Supreme Hunter Kreshvalum stood at the head of the table, his forearms gesturing frantically as he delivered the most humiliating report in Void Hunter history. In the past 72 hours, he began, his voice cracking with disbelief, we have lost 47 ships, not destroyed, lost. Our warriors are surrendering, voluntarily. They're turning themselves in to the humans and asking for something, called asylum. The council erupted in outraged chittering and mandible clicking. Elder Hunter Vashter, whose fleet had ravaged the Andromeda Spiral, slammed his clawed fist on the table. Possible. Void Hunters do not surrender. We fight until death or victory. That's what I thought too, Kreshvalum replied miserably. Until I received this transmission from Commander Dexon of the Blood Harvest. The holographic display activated, showing a Void Hunter warrior sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable cell. But something was wrong with the image. Warrior looked relaxed, content even. His mandibles weren't clicking aggressively. His claws weren't extended in threat posture. "Supreme Hunter," the warrior said in the transmission, "I need to tell you something important. The humans aren't torturing us. They're being nice to us. Really nice. They gave me something called ice cream, and it's the most amazing the thing I've ever tasted. Also, they have these moving pictures called movies that tell stories about feelings and friendship, and I think I'm starting to understand emotions I didn't know I had." The War Council sat in stunned silence. Several members looked physically ill. "There's more," Kreshfaloom continued reluctantly. "The humans have something called ARES, an artificial intelligence that's been conducting what they call therapy sessions with our captured warriors. It's teaching them concepts we've never encountered." Another transmission began playing. This time it showed the human AI's cheerful interface speaking to a group of captured void hunters who were sitting in a circle like younglings at story time. "Good morning, everyone," Ares said brightly. "Today, we're going to explore the concept of personal fulfillment. Now, I know you've all spent your lives harvesting other species, but have you ever asked yourselves what makes you happy? What are your dreams? Your passions? What would you do if you could be anything you wanted to be?" One of the captured warriors raised a tentative claw. I always liked growing things. Before I joined the fleet, I had a small garden on my homeworld. The way seeds turned into plants felt like magic." "That's wonderful," Ares replied enthusiastically. "Agriculture is a noble profession. In fact, several human worlds are looking for experienced farmers. Would you like me to arrange an interview?" Elder Hunter Vashter made a noise like a dying engine. This is worse than torture. "They're corrupting the fundamental nature of our species." "It gets worse," Kreshfaloom said, advancing to the next report. "The humans have discovered that we're a hive-minded species. But instead of exploiting this weakness, they're using it to help us develop individual personalities." The next video showed Sergeant Hannah, the human who had rescued the ethereal children, sitting across from a massive void hunter warrior in what looked like a therapy session. "So Grixmar," Hannah was saying, "gently, tell me about your childhood. What was it like growing up in the collective?" The warrior, who could have torn Hannah apart with his bare claws, was fidgeting nervously. We never had individual childhoods. We were born into the collective mind. We shared all thoughts, all purposes. The only goal was conquest and harvest." "Must have been lonely," Hannah said with genuine sympathy. "Never having your own thoughts, your own dreams. No wonder you're all so angry all the time." The warrior's mandibles began clicking in distress. I never thought about it that way. Is that why I feel empty inside? Even after successful raids, there was never satisfaction, only the need for more. That's a very insightful observation, Grixmar. You're making real progress. The transmission ended, leaving the War Council in horrified silence. Finally, Elder Vexilla, the oldest member present, spoke in a whisper. "They're making our warriors... introspective, self-aware, individual. This is biological warfare of the highest order." "The worst part," Kreshfaloom continued, "is that it's working. We're receiving surrender requests faster than we can process them. Entire crews are abandoning their ships to experience something called human hospitality. They're sending us messages about finding themselves, pursuing personal growth." He played another transmission. This one showed what appeared to be a void hunter cooking class. Human instructors were teaching captured warriors how to prepare food that didn't involve processing sentient beings. The warriors were wearing aprons and taking notes with the enthusiasm of students. "Today we're making pizza," a human chef was explaining. "The secret is in the sauce. You want to season it with love and care for the people who will eat it." Scarred Void Hunter Warrior raised his hand. "Chef Kenji, what if we want to make pizza for our former enemies? How much love should we use then?" "The same amount," Chef Kenji replied with a smile. "That's the beautiful thing about cooking. It's an act of kindness regardless of who you're feeding." Several War Council members looked like they were about to be sick. "There's one more thing," Kreshfaloom said, his voice barely audible. "The humans have introduced our warriors to something called entertainment media shows and books and games that explore complex emotions and relationships. Our most feared raiders are now gathering in groups to discuss something called character development and narrative themes. The final transmission showed a group of Void hunters having an animated discussion about a human television series. Really think Commander Shepard made the right choice in Mass Effect 3, one was saying. Synthesis allows organic and synthetic life to coexist peacefully. But what about free will? Another argued. Doesn't synthesis impose a fundamental change on all life without consent? You're both missing the point, a third interrupted. The real message is about understanding and cooperation between different species. Like what's happening to us right now? They all nodded thoughtfully, their former bloodthirsty nature completely absent. The War Council chamber was dead silent, except for the sound of labored breathing. Finally, Elder Vostra spoke. How do we fight an enemy that defeats us by being nice to us? Supreme Hunter Kreshvalum had no answer. And in 3,000 years of conquest, they had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't just defeating the Void Hunters militarily. They were fundamentally changing what it meant to be a Void Hunter. Sir, his aide interrupted nervously, we're receiving another batch of surrender requests. This group says they want to explore creative writing and maybe start a book club. Kreshvalum closed his eyes and wondered if this was what defeat felt like. Not the violent, honorable defeat of warriors, but something far worse. The complete dissolution of everything his species had ever been. Outside, more Void Hunter ships were broadcasting surrender signals, their crews eager to experience the strange human concepts of kindness, personal growth, and frozen dairy products. The galaxy's most feared predators were discovering something they'd never known existed, the possibility of being something other than monsters. 6 months after the infamous Void Hunter incident, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the most peaceful period in recorded history. But it wasn't the kind of peace anyone had expected. Admiral Minji stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching something that would have been impossible to imagine half a year ago. Former Void Hunter dreadnoughts, their hulls painted in cheerful colors, were distributing food supplies to refugee camps across the Kepler system. The ships that had once carried terror across the stars now carried hope. Status report, Ares, she said, sipping her morning coffee. The reformed Galactic Improvement Initiative is exceeding all projections. Admiral, the AI replied cheerfully. Former Void Hunter warriors have established 17 rehabilitation centers, 43 agricultural colonies, and surprisingly, 12 art therapy studios. Who knew that beings bred for conquest had such a natural talent for sculpture? Through the viewport, Minji could see one of those former dreadnoughts, now renamed Second Chances, docking with the space station. The boarding ramp lowered, and instead of armored raiders, out walked beings in colorful civilian clothes. Carrying medical supplies and what appeared to be homemade baked goods, Commander Deho appeared on the communication screen from the planet's surface. His uniform was dirty from working in the fields, but he looked happier than Minji had seen him in years. Admiral, you need to see this harvest report. The agricultural colonies are producing 3 times the expected yield. Turns out, when you give former warriors a chance to grow things instead of destroying them, they put the same intensity into farming that they used to put into raiding. Minji smiled. Deho had volunteered to oversee the agricultural rehabilitation program, despite having no farming experience whatsoever. But he'd approached it like a military campaign, organizing crop rotations and irrigation systems with tactical precision. The former Void Hunters had responded to his leadership with enthusiasm that bordered on religious devotion. And the therapy programs? Mingi asked. Even better. Grixmar, you remember him? The one who wanted to garden? He's now running our largest agricultural training center. Yesterday he sent me a poem he wrote about the beauty of seedlings. It made 3 of my officers cry. Ares chimed in with additional updates. I should mention that our therapy sessions have had some unexpected side effects. The former warriors are displaying remarkable empathy and emotional intelligence. Several have requested advanced training in conflict resolution and counseling. They want to help other species work through trauma they probably caused in the first place, Minji muttered. Exactly, who better to understand the psychological impact of raiding than former raiders? They're incredibly effective therapists because they truly comprehend the depth of harm they caused. The guilt is motivating them to work twice as hard at healing. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. The same beings who had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were now sending handwritten apology letters to their former victims. Ares had helped them establish a comprehensive victim outreach program, complete with reparations funds and trauma counseling services. Admiral came. Another voice over the comm. This is Lieutenant Aaron reporting from the Ethereal Exchange Program. Mingy remembered Aaron, the Marine who had rescued the ethereal children during the initial raid. She had volunteered to serve as a cultural liaison when the Ethereals had requested permanent human protection. How are our tentacled friends doing, Lieutenant? They single, dapting, ma'am. Though I think I accidentally traumatized half their poetry council yesterday. I mentioned that humans enjoy something called bungee jumping. 3 of them fainted. One started writing an epic about the madness of Deathworld inhabitants. Mingy laughed. The Ethereals had been so grateful for their rescue that they had established a cultural exchange program with Earth. Their bioluminescent poetry about human heroism had become bestsellers across 17 star systems. The titles were wonderfully dramatic: Songs for the Star Warriors, Ballads of the Deathworld Guardians, and the particularly popular Why Do They Jump from Perfectly Safe Aircraft. They're still processing the concept of extreme sports, Aaron continued. I showed them a video of human rock climbing yesterday, and their council spent 4 hours debating whether humans have a death wish, or are actually immortal beings pretending to be mortal for fun. The cultural exchange had produced some interesting results. Human scientists were learning about ethereal crystal growing techniques, while ethereal philosophers were struggling to understand why humans considered mortal danger to be recreational. The philosophical debates alone had generated enough academic papers to fill several universities. Ares, what's the latest on galactic crime statistics? Mingy asked. Remarkably low, Admiral. It seems that having the galaxy's former most dangerous raiders working as therapists and farmers has had a significant deterrent effect on other criminal organizations. Nobody wants to risk being rehabilitated the way we rehabilitated the Void Hunters. That was an unexpected bonus. Word had spread quickly through the galaxy's criminal underworld about what happened when you crossed the humans. It wasn't death or imprisonment that frightened them. It was the possibility of being forced to confront their life choices and find healthier ways to express themselves. Several pirate organizations had actually turned themselves in voluntarily, requesting therapy and career counseling. Ours had been delighted to oblige, setting up rehabilitation programs that were somehow both more effective and more terrifying than traditional punishment. Admiral Ares said thoughtfully, I've been analyzing the data from our intervention. I believe we may have accidentally solved galactic conflict. How's that? Well, think about it. We've demonstrated that the most efficient way to deal with dangerous beings isn't to destroy them, but to help them find better ways to live. The threat of forced self-improvement and emotional growth has proven more effective than any weapon. Criminal organizations are dissolving themselves rather than risk being subjected to therapy and career counseling. Mingy considered this. Just 6 months, humanity had gone from unknown backwater species to the galaxy's unofficial peacekeepers. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through the terrifying power of kindness, backed by overwhelming military superiority. You know what the strangest part is? She mused. We never intended to become galactic peacekeepers. We just responded to a distress call. Sometimes the best outcomes are unintentional, Ares replied, though I should mention that we're receiving requests from 47 star systems asking for permanent human protection. Apparently, being protected by beings who consider apex predators to be good boys makes everyone feel very secure. Through the viewport, Mingy watched as a group of former Void Hunters taught ethereal children how to plant vegetables in the station's hydroponics bay. The contrast between the massive, scarred warriors and the delicate, glowing younglings should have been terrifying. Instead, it was heartwarming. Mission status? She asked. Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Ethereals report feeling more emotionally secure than they have in centuries. Crime rates are at historic lows. Former raiders are discovering fulfillment through agriculture and art therapy. And apparently, human ice cream has become the most requested diplomatic gift in galactic history. Minji grinned. You know what I think happened here, Ares?
What?
That, Admiral? I think we accidentally discovered that the best way to keep the peace is to be so overwhelmingly dangerous that war becomes inconvenient, and so aggressively kind that violence becomes embarrassing. An elegant strategy, Ares agreed. Also, I should mention that 3 more former Void Hunters just submitted applications to human agricultural colleges. They want to learn about crop rotation and sustainable farming practices. Looking out at the stars, Minji reflected on the chain of events that had brought them here. A single transposed digit in a distress call had connected to species who had never heard of each other. The ethereals had expected polite, diplomatic intervention. Instead, they'd gotten something much better: neighbors who treated impossible odds as mild inconvenience and backed up their compassion with enough firepower to make the point. Non-negotiable. The distress beacon had definitely reached the wrong species. But as Minji watched former galactic terrors carefully tending gardens while ethereal children giggled at their gentle awkwardness, she couldn't help but think that sometimes wrong was exactly right. The galaxy had never been safer. And it was all because someone had made a typo.